Welcome and thanks for joining. I'm Jared Linares, Network Security Engineer at AeroDefense. This webinar is part of our educational series for law enforcement and public safety professionals focused on providing practical insights into how to respond to drones. In this session, we are featuring Dave Krause, co-founder and president of Influential Drones. Dave is a recognized leader in the drone space, serving as an FAA Drone Pro, national industry member, and chief pilot for BVLOS flight operations. He brings over 20 years of experience in software architecture and project management and currently manages the FAA test site program at SBD Norton. He's also Part 137 certified, giving him a unique perspective on both commercial and regulated drone operations. Let's dive in and hear directly from Dave about what public safety professionals need to know when it comes to responding to drones in the field.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Krause. Thanks for the introduction there, Jared. We're here today just to talk about the activity involving drones in the national airspace. As an industry member and an FAA safety team drone pro, I'm going to blend in some of the regulations and information that's going to be able to help you with a lot of the subject matter experience that I have already on this topic. All right, so today's presentation is called Insights from a Drone Pro, Drone Activity in the Airspace. This presentation is coordinated by AeroDefense, and it actually came from a conversation that Linda Thiemba and I had with the FAA at a drone responders convention in Williamsburg, Virginia. So this is their idea, and I think it's a great one. And the FAA had made the connection and asked me to do the presentation. So with that, we're going to dive right into it. What you're seeing on the screen is my my bio. As many are aware, I'm pretty active in the drone industry. We've been in business since 2017. And throughout the course of the industry, have constantly been evolving with it and essentially pushing the envelope to make sure that the industry is operating safe. There's nothing that the FAA views as more important than the safety of the national airspace. A lot of the roles that I have in an advisory capacity helps me maintain a pulse on the industry. As Jared had mentioned in his introduction, I am the range manager for 44803 test range over in San Bernardino, California. We're also a collaboration facility with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and I was the counter US consultant for the city of Philadelphia. So what essentially happens is the questions that we get most often is, quite frankly, is that a drone in the air, and what am I supposed to do about it? And what we find is that more often than not, the information is not readily out there or publicly shared in a way that is making things informational. So this presentation is intended for the purpose of helping to bring you up to speed on what you need to do in order to be successful with your drone program and maintain the safety of the airspace above the area in which you are responsible for serving. Common questions that we're hearing are things like, is that a drone up in the area? Do I have permission to be there? What is it doing? Where did it come from? Where is it going? Who's flying that? Is it my own team's drone? Where the heck is the operator? These common questions come because, when you're looking at a drone up in the air, it's very hard to understand where it is in proximity to where you're standing based on its elevation, exactly what it is flying over, and where the operator is at the time. And we have seen situations quite recently, actually, where agencies are, operating with mutual aid with other departments, and there is fairly decent communication, but in some respects, they don't even know that another department has a drone in the air. So a lot of people are reaching out to the FAA or calling other drone pros, our company included, and asking, what is it that I do? My response to that is it's not a matter of what do you do or what should you do, which is a common thing that other people are sharing with each other. Almost like there's, like an expert uh, among each individual. One agency's doing it one way, another agency's doing it another way, another agency's doing it a different way. And it's just by word of mouth, the telephone game. And that's not really the proper thing to do. Instead of saying, what should you do? The question you should really be asking yourself is, what can I do? And with that, I would guide you first and foremost to look at the FAA's recently published Public Safety Small Drone Playbook. You can scan the QR codes with your phone and download it locally, or follow the URL and get the document yourself. The document makes all the difference in the world, because without something to properly guide you, you're just going to take that step right off that cliff. When we think about the difference between drones and operators, or aircraft and operators, we need to understand that they're two distinctly different systems. One is the operator that is holding and manipulating the controls, and the other one is the aircraft that is receiving the controls from the operator. In some cases, the aircraft is flying a mission that is programmed into it. Either way, and in all instances, they're actually two distinct things. So let's talk about who owns the airspace. And the answer is, it's not you, it's the FAA. The FAA has the exclusive authority over airspace safety and efficiency. In fact, state and local laws may be preempted if they conflict with FAA rules. We're seeing things like that, like trying to restrict altitudes or flight paths over certain areas, trying to initiate citywide drone bans, or other types of mandates, such as forcing operators to put certain restrictions on their equipment. Compromising an aircraft or a flight mission is, in fact, potentially adding risk to the airspace. And in the eyes of the FAA, a drone is an aircraft. So we need to make sure that we do things correctly. Having said that, an operator of a drone may be doing something legally, depending on authorizations that they have. But if they don't have that authorization, much like someone who's flying for recreational purposes, or perhaps someone who just recently got their 107 and doesn't understand the implications, we would call them both careless and clueless. These individuals are potentially could be causing conflict. So generally speaking, flights that are taking place within 1.45 miles of certain stadiums are prohibited. Flight activity over people or at night is also an issue. And the FAA has made a performance-based decision on operations at night and over people, which require propeller guards, parachutes, and proper lighting. But more often than not, you see a crowd of people, or you see an event, someone says, hey, this would be a really cool shot with my drone. They don't understand, in most instances, that there actually are safety issues and concerns involved with that flight. Other things that are happening very often are flights that are taking place beyond line of sight. So beyond line of sight includes flying with FPV goggles and not having a visual observer, flying a drone past or over a tree and losing sight of it, flights on the other side of a building, having your back turned and not actually looking at the aircraft, as well as physically taking it an extended distance where it is so far away you couldn't even see it on a clear sky. These are the things that a lot of people are doing, because quite frankly, these drones have 5-mile range, 4-mile range, and even 10 or more, depending on which version of the aircraft you're flying. And the FAA has proven that the general size aircraft, you have visibility for about a half a mile on a good day. So this is something that we're seeing quite often. Other things that, without proper authorization, a drone pilot cannot do is actually not yield to other aircraft, whether it's a hot air balloon, paraglider, fixed wing, or a helicopter. People are flying in such a way that is potentially hazardous to other things. And in most situations, the FAA is not granting the authority to others to potentially not yield the right of way to aircraft. And in the instances where there are actually accidents, there's been 17 confirmed so far involving a drone and a helicopter or manned aviation unit. In all instances, obviously because a physical impact occurred, that operator has not yielded right away. And lastly, without authorization, we're seeing a lot of remote operators actually putting a drone up and interfering with first response emergencies. That could be something as simple as disrupting a medevac, or putting a drone up and just causing a hazard to other drones that are in the air. We can break this down pretty simply on what a state can do and what local laws can do to govern usage. And this is actually a hot topic right now because one of the states had recently just passed a law that they can mitigate. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to work out for them, because as mentioned, the FAA is the authority of the airspace that's above us. So here's the things that local and state laws are permitting to do. You're allowed to control the takeoff and landing from public property. You can enforce privacy violations, harassment, criminal mischief, or in some cases, filming around critical infrastructure. What you're not able to do is to create broad restrictions that basically constrict the airspace. There are rules involving critical infrastructure. 42 USC 5195 is where you would actually find the definition of vital assets. And essentially what federal rules are mentioning is that, believe it or not, most airspace is not restricted over critical infrastructure locations. However, if it's a nuclear facility or something that is weapons related, there are constraints. What we're seeing is, questions coming out there like, are you potentially flying close to or over a bridge where there is active traffic? In which case, yes, it's critical infrastructure, but we're factoring in that there's traffic occupied by people or moving people in that area. That's the raise of concern. Similarly, if we're looking over, flying over railways, again, there is no restriction over federal or over the airspace. However, there are people inside those rail cars, and it's being treated that way. So again, drones may fly near critical infrastructure unless airspace is otherwise restricted. And other ways that airspace are restricted is, something that's within a facility map, or, when you need to apply for a LANC authorization, bearing in mind that, through these applications, they can still gain access simply by letting the FAA know that they're there. On the flip side, what we're seeing is state level restrictions start to criminalize flights over certain areas. New Jersey, Tennessee, Florida, and Louisiana were among some of the states that are criminalizing flights over power plants, water treatment facilities, and transportation hubs. In this case, a few instances we're seeing that these states are trying to enforce fines and arrest the operator even though the FAA has permitted the flight activity to take place through lands. I see this as kind of conflicting because, generally speaking, most operations using a drone are legal. We talked about the careless, we talked about the clueless. Later on, we're going to mention criminal, but there is a category as well that is the mass majority of everybody, and those are the operators that are compliant. So just keep in mind that drones can legally operate in most of the airspace that's around you, and that it shouldn't just be blanketly assumed that a flight that's taking place in a certain spot is unauthorized. So we're going to go through a little bit more of the rules that are impacting the industry and why it is important to actually locate the pilot so that you can go up there, question them, and talk to them, understand, if something needs to be escalated. The more information you're able to obtain, the more informed you're going to be to properly respond. Remote identification is Part 89 in the federal regulations. And essentially what it's doing is it's helping to identify most of the compliant drones in the national airspace between a certain weight class. A lot of people call this a digital license plate. It helps local security teams and LEOs locate the operator of the drone. Now, understand that remote ID exists in different formats. One of them is a modular beacon that is physically attached and Velcro to the aircraft. And the other is what is called standard remote ID, which is broadcasting by default on the aircraft that is manufactured after a certain date. And only in standard remote ID are we able to identify the location of both the aircraft and the operator. But under a modular remote ID, we can at least identify the drone in the air. There's been a lot of talk about the executive order that came out recently, restoring American airspace sovereignty. And essentially, the President of the United States manages operations out of an executive branch. And through the executive branch, he goes and issues executive orders. After the president signs that order, the White House sends that to the Federal Register. And essentially, that's what this is. So he is basically giving explanation or giving direction and saying, I need you to establish a task force that recommends enforcement and authority. Go ahead and push law enforcement to access remote ID data. So get this information in a way that is usable to all who need it. Create a counter UAS training center, which to the best of my knowledge, I believe is going to be in Huntsville. And then create grant opportunities to help departments get drone detection software. Now, whether that is a full-blown counter UAS system, which would include other detection technologies, radar, RF, your optical CCTV, your CCTV, which is connected to your PTZ cameras, or if we're bringing in acoustic sensors and some of the other sorts, or if we're just doing remote ID detection. The fact that there are grants and funding opportunities that are going to be made available means that we're going to be able to restore the sovereignty of our airspace. And the other thing that the executive order is pushing for is an update to, the rules of use regarding detect and mitigation. So now we have systems in place that are going to, over time, allow us to understand what's happening in the airspace that's around us. The next step that needs to happen is we need to understand at which point do we actually involve the FAA. And it's only when the drone is operating in an unsafe manner or violating a certain rule under Part 107 that would, we're going to reach out to the FAA and ask for help. Obviously, if you're dealing with a secure area or a large mass gathering and there are TFRs and other things in place, in the event that an aircraft, enters the area and you have approached the pilot and obtained the appropriate information, you can share that with the FAA as well. It is really important to understand, though, the FAA does not enforce criminal statutes. They only have the ability to issue penalties and fines as a civil authority. And it's actually the DOJ who comes in and goes the criminal route. So if you think of a fork in the road, when an incident actually happens, you gather the information that you need in as much detail as possible. And when you submit it to the FAA, they're going to then share it with their federal partners, and it's either going to go the civil or criminal route. The FAA has created this drone safety playbook, which we previously mentioned. And if you download it and look at the "What is my authority" section of the book, you'll get a lot more detail on this. You'll also be able to understand that once you go and, see something, how to actually report it to the FAA. And that's going to start by reaching out to the Regional Operations Center. And you're going to be providing them information such as what you see on the screen. You need to identify the operator and take place and any witnesses to the event, bearing in mind that it's possible for you to be the witness as well. But in all the experience that we have and what we are seeing, the FAA can only go so far without a witness statement. So getting someone to visually see someone in the act is very, very important. So this all needs to be documented. You're also going to document if the flight that's taking place is by a recreational hobby pilot, someone operating commercially under Part 107, or someone working, or doing something in their capacity as a public use aircraft. Let's face it, we're all trying our best to fly safely, do the right thing, but all parties make mistakes. And the truth is that the FAA is your friend until they're not. And when they're not, they have to treat you like anybody else because they have regulations that need to be enforced. So when you're capturing the information that needs to be captured, make sure that you designate the type of operation that's taking place. I'm not going to go so far as to say that the FAA is going to give a little bit more leniency based on one or the other. But maybe there are different pathways to remediate after the FAA decides what they want to do. Other information you need to capture is the type of device and registration pertaining to the aircraft. Federal regulations require that the aircrafts are supposed to be marked on the exteriors. So, you're not seizing the aircraft in most instances, but you do need to capture information that's about it. And the registration number is among the most important. I would suggest that you should also take a picture of the serial number for the aircraft also, because sometimes, it's possible that the registration is incorrect. I would also encourage you to obtain from the remote operator a copy of their registration certificate. Next up, details. Where did this event actually occur? And tell us about the incident. Person went and flew in a reckless manner in close proximity to a crowd of people and flew over a baby in a stroller. Did they fly at 400 feet or were they flying at 10 feet above their heads? The FAA is going to make the determination, as well as the DOJ, on what's important. but they're not going to be able to make that determination without you providing the details that matter to them. Date, time, and place are important factors, as well as those details on what actually was witnessed when the incident occurred. Gather as much evidence as possible, photos, video. If you're gonna confiscate the device, make sure that that is justified and warranted appropriately. Handle it like you would with anything relative to chain of custody. Once again, the FAA's UAS drone public safety playbook has information on what to do and is literally giving you the information to guide you forward. In fact, they have a checklist and a form that you're going to follow, which is talking you through some of the information that matters. And the reason why these questions are relevant in particular is because some of them actually go back specifically to regulations. So these questions are targeted purposely and are available for you in the public safety playbook. Also available for download on through the FAA's website is the Law Enforcement Response Leo Pocket Card, which just is, I would say it's a 4x6 card that is just giving you the basic information on what it is that you need to do. Notice they use the acronym DRONE, and as a reference for you, you want to detect, report, observe, notice, and execute in order to get the information and respond appropriately. We put this in for redundancy, but it's important to understand. Most operations are legal. So, the Remote 107 operator who has their Part 107 commercial license under the regulation is responsible for the safety and the success of their flight mission. So that burden of responsibility falls on them. And if you go and interrupt their activity before the aircraft is safely stowed, there is always the possibility that you could be blamed for the aircraft failing because you distracted purposely the operator. The same is true with mitigation. When you mitigate an aircraft or physically take it over, and there's a variety of ways in which that can happen. Let me be clear when we say this, that as of now, on June 27th, 2025, you cannot mitigate a drone without proper authorization. And this authorization is granted by the government. So, you can't just buy the technology and do the work. You can't shoot down a drone. You can't, knock it out of the sky unless you are ready to assume the liability of the action. So know the rules. Take the time to identify where that pilot is standing and go up there and talk to him. There are 100 different, not 100, I would say there's probably about 10 different ways that you can mitigate a scenario. And the one that won't get you in trouble is talking. So start with that first. You leverage remote ID and find that operator. When is a flight becomes criminal? When the person who is flying the aircraft starts invading other people's privacy purposely. When they're trespassing over public property, over private property. When there's other things that are occurring at a low altitude and the aircraft is not transitioning, it is loitering over the space. Obviously, if we weaponize or essentially arm the aircraft in a dangerous manner. That is not legal as well. If you go in and you disrupt an event from taking place, such as a national sporting event, which is protected by a TFR, and then you go and a drone is flowing and physically disrupts the entire activities that are planned. If you disrupt something around, or if something is disrupted around an airport or an emergency services operation, where, for example, we've talked about, disrupting the ability of a medevac coming in. There have been incidents on security violations using a drone to gather secrets against the government. And also, if you're taking flights over prisons. If you have questions about it, the best thing you should do is gather the information that you have as it is happening and reach out to a LEAP agent. A LEAP agent is a law enforcement assistance representative of the FAA. And through the LEAP program, you have access to someone in law enforcement to help guide you. The information is on the screen on what the numbers are and who to reach out to. Let's talk about some of the, past things that we are seeing in the criminal level. In most cases, the fines that we are seeing are ranging from, hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars. We'll start with Skypan. Skypan was a drone photography company that actually was fined for operating illegally over New York City and Chicago. They performed roughly 65 flights, and they were fined $1.9 million. They eventually settled for $200,000. They were one of the early ones that got caught up. And then we have in Florida a $32,700 fine for interfering with a law enforcement operation. This was in Wesley Chapel, Florida, actually. And essentially what happened is that there was a police helicopter that was searching for a subject, and the drone actually flew so close to the helicopter that the helicopter had to halt its search. Next up, we have the situation that happened in Miami, which was an $18,200 fine. A drone pilot who flew an unregistered aircraft in a TFR at a Grand Prix event. And locally to us here in the New Jersey, Philadelphia area was the $182,000 fine racked up by a person who was live streaming on YouTube under the channel name of Philly Drone Life. And he essentially created so many infractions. He racked up these fines. And just earlier, I think it was last year, he took a deal in lieu of the fines and basically agreed to shut down his YouTube channel. He forfeited his rights to fly a drone again. And the government actually seized all of his equipment, which is, again, something that the government has a right to do if something is, a serious matter. So we talk about the fines, which is the civil side of things. And then here on the confiscation and the criminal side are things that are happening. Other criminal charges that are taking place include misdemeanors and felonies. And it's always going to depend on the severity of the offense. And in rare instances, we're seeing jail time, unless it's something that is a serious violation, such as interfering with an aircraft or smuggling contraband. So to recap, violating FAA regulations is not something that's criminal. It's a civil violation. Rather, it's the DOJ that enforces those Title 18 violations. So let's break down safety versus security. When we're thinking about the risk to the national airspace and the reason why we need to be mindful of the activity in the airspace that's above us, we need to look at it from two different points of view. The first one is the safety side. Is the activity that's taking place a collision hazard? Is it something that's going to disrupt manned aircraft operations? Is it something that's going to create a public endangerment, whether the drone malfunctions while it is in flight or it crashes? It doesn't matter if the action, such as the crash, is purposeful or unintentional. Will it endanger the public if that incident occurs? What is that level of risk? And is that activity that is taking place interfering with an emergency response operation? Be it firefighting, SWAT, or responding to a traffic accident. Manned aircraft, the general public, and public safety first responders, you guys have the priority over that drone. So safety is what's important in the eyes of the FAA. On the security side of things, we need to start thinking about what is actually happening. Is the flight that's taking place around critical infrastructure not supposed to be occurring? Are they loitering and looking at certain things that are deemed as sensitive? Now, I have to say this. There are some critical infrastructure facilities that, in the eyes of the people that work at the critical infrastructure facility, are sensitive. And I'm waiting to see where that definitive hard line comes in on what exactly needs to be protected. Because sometimes the opinions of the people that work there are not necessarily the same opinions of people who are, we'll just say, higher up. But it is still a security concern from all people's perspective. It's just a matter of how it's going to be handled, and that's yet to be seen. I'm hoping the executive order is going to push a little bit more clarity on that topic. We all know the difference between a criminal act and something that is terrorist activity, with some of the things that are occurring today in the Russian and Ukraine conflict. If such a thing is witnessed here in the States, obviously it raises a high security concern and needs to be dealt with accordingly. And then we have privacy violations, which would essentially fall under someone's personal right to be protected or feel protected, within their privacy of their own home and other things of that sort. So AeroDefense has coordinated this presentation for its partners. And through the instruction of the FAA, I've had the privilege of sharing some of this insight. And the insight talks about, the importance of understanding the activity, the risks, and things that are happening in the airspace. Talks about the reference to the FAA Public Safety Toolkit document. What we're looking at here is the value that drone detection systems bring. And essentially what you are able to do with technology is monitor activity that takes place within a certain airspace. And with that information, you're enabling your agency and your team to obtain data which will allow you to take action. Things like the location of the pilot, the route in which the aircraft has flown or is flying. Sometimes you can predict the direction and where it's going based on its speed and its trajectory, its altitude, and in some cases, even the aircraft make and model. We're not going to talk about the legalities of looking inside of the packet or behind the envelope. There are rules that are protecting individuals' privacies, and at the time of this recording, we don't have yet the response to the president's executive order. But leveraging technology that will enable you to locate the aircraft and the operator does make a timely difference. And here's an example of the one of the applications that is available through AeroDefense. And there are other companies that produce things that are similar, which enable you to see trends and identify actions and activity that's taking place. Through these methods and techniques, you'll be able to quickly see who is your repeat offender. And you'll be able to escalate things accordingly based on that information. This information is coming to you in real time. It's not like it's activity that you're seeing post-flight. So time is of the essence to be trained on understanding what it is you see, taking the appropriate action to mitigate that risk. Bearing in mind that, once again, most flight activities are not criminal. And in the cases of the careless and clueless, these are people who just need to be educated. But without the information at your fingertips, you're not going to be able to respond and make the appropriate difference. And having the right usable data that supports the prosecution will help keep your airspace safe in your area. So to close out this presentation, my suggestion is this. Start by looking at the FAA's Public Safety Small Drone Playbook. Flip through it, gather the information that you need. In fact, print it out and keep it with you in your gear. Familiarize yourself with those federal laws as well as the state and local laws. Understand that, if there is a local law that town council or anyone in your jurisdiction is putting up, that it is very possible that that law is not legal. So familiarize yourself so that you can present in an intelligent way information to the FAA and the case to the prosecutor. Don't assume that all flight activities are unauthorized or a threat. Remember, the executive order is supposed to provide grant assistance for detection hardware. So if you come up with a plan, you have the ability of getting the tools that you need to gather information. And that information is enabling you to determine where that pilot is located. And only after you go and you interview that individual will you actually be able to assess whether it was careless, clueless, criminal, or compliant intent. With that, we're going to end this presentation and thank the team at AeroDefense for reaching out to the FAA and inviting me to present. Thank you.
Dave, thank you for the wonderful presentation. If you don't mind me asking, where can people find out more info about what you do?
So the best thing to do is actually visit the Influential Drones website, influentialdrones.com, or you can always call our office and basically kind of ask what we can do to service you. We primarily support public entities. I would say about 85% of our business, and it's all been by word of mouth because they've had positive experiences in the way we work with them. We take just a very unbiased approach and always elevate safety. I am a firm believer that the industry needs to work together and collaborate. And through presentations like this, free resources such as the FAA safety.gov, working with subject matter experts, not just influential drones, but other law enforcement personnel, organizations like drone responders, Law Enforcement Drone Association, Airborne Public Safety. We can all do the right thing and have a good time and keep the airspace clear. But you can come to us on our website and learn more about us.
Thank you. And again, thanks everyone for listening today. We hope to see you on another webinar in the series.